You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest Ty Fahner. The man's career has been spent on politics and public policy. We were just talking before the show. Ty was the Attorney General for the state of Illinois from 1980 to 83, appointed by Big Jim Thompson. He's been a prosecutor, he's been a trial lawyer, he's been a plaintiff's trial lawyer, he's been a defense trial lawyer, he's been a major lawyer at a major law firm, 1800 attorney, Mayor Brown. And now he's the president. You know, Ty probably always wanted to be president of the United States. You're not there yet. You may get there.
There's time.
But right now, Ty Fahner, our guest, is president of the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago. He knows how to fix, well, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do what people always tell me. Just shut up, Jeff. Just be quiet and let your guest talk. So we're gonna play 20 questions very quickly. Okay. It's almost like word association or Rorschach tests. You fix a lot of things. For the first 12 things, I'm not even use the word fix, but that's the thing.
It's not pejorative.
No, you're not that kind of fixer. Right. Illinois' government pension problems. Give me a 1 or 2 word response. Fixing Illinois' government pension problems.
The people receiving the pensions have to pay more to have the pensions when they retire.
Fixing Chicago's public school system.
You need more choice in the form of charter schools or others that cause the current Chicago public schools to simply perform better.
Fixing city of Chicago government.
Well, we got a new mayor, and he has a transition plan that the Civic Committee helped put together, and I think he can do it.
Fixing the Cook County government.
Tony Preckwinkle has a transition plan from the Civic Committee of Chicago, and
she's new as the Cook County Board President.
She's new, and she is a wonderful lady and is working hard, and I think she's going to do it as well.
Fixing Medicaid.
Don't have a clue.
You haven't studied that yet.
I haven't studied that.
When's the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club going to attack it?
When we get the pensions and the state reform, so we have money to turn to other things.
Fixing Medicare.
Don't know.
You'll have to study that as well.
Yeah.
You're the kind of guy, you don't just you don't shoot from the hip. If you haven't done the research, if you haven't done the background, you are a lawyer's lawyer. You know, once it's been briefed, once you've read the research, the memos, you're ready to go try it. But you're not going to go out there and tell the judge you know it if you don't, right?
I can't do that, right.
Okay. Fixing Social Security.
Same as the state pension system. Either less benefits or pay more, or the people that are entitled won't get them. No easy way.
Fixing national defense.
Oh, now I'm over my skis on that. I can't do it in one sentence or half an hour. I'm sorry.
Fixing the Illinois Republican Party.
The Republican Party has to pull more together and speak with a more singular voice in the various factions in the Republican Party.
Fixing the National Republican Party.
Same thing.
Fixing the National Democratic Party.
I'll take a pass.
All right. Fixing America.
Go back to basics. Work hard, believe in your country, honor the Constitution, and you earn what you get.
The best car you've ever driven?
68 Dodge Charger.
Why?
Because it's my first new car ever.
Do you have one now?
I have one now.
Mint condition?
Mint condition.
What's the value of that?
About 50 grand.
And you wouldn't give it up for anything?
Oh, no, that's true. No, I'd give it up in a minute if it meant something to somebody else.
Right, yeah. But not for 50K.
Not for 50K.
Not even if I offered you 60K?
No.
70K?
Don't need it yet.
All right. Best movie this year? We should say we're taping this show. We're taping this show on February 26th in the afternoon. So this evening, the Academy Awards. And by the time people get to watch it, either on youtube.com/publicaffairs or in the suburbs, by the time you watch it, you'll know what the best picture was from the Academy Awards. Ty Fahner, let me ask you, make 2 things. What's the prediction that you have for the best picture, and what do you think is the best picture?
I'm not a movie guy to make a prediction, but I do like The King's Speech very, very much. And if that's in the running, I think that's got to be one of the very best.
All right. Best book you ever read?
Profiles in Courage, John Kennedy.
Was that influential on you? Was it inspirational?
I was at the University of Michigan when he was shot. I followed and tried to read a lot of things after he was dead. And Profiles in Courage is something he put out as a relatively young man and politician, and I think the principles there are pretty great. I would recommend it to any young person or any old person.
Most influential person up close on you?
In politics or in life?
Both. Let's take in politics first.
Governor Thompson.
Most influential person in life?
My wife.
Okay. Most influential person from afar, not somebody you've necessarily known, not your wife, not Jim Thompson, but somebody from afar who's had an impact on you.
Well, you have to know that I'm a Republican, but President Reagan, not just the way he's used, but I've met him and I know him and knew him.
The most watched TV show by you now, currently?
SpongeBob SquarePants with my grandson.
All right. Best movie ever made?
The Quiet Man, John Wayne Maureen O'Hara.
Best decision you ever made?
Marrying my wife, asking her to marry me, I guess.
And your wife's name?
Ann.
Mother of your 3 kids?
3 kids, married for 45 years.
4 grandkids?
4 grandkids.
All right, so let's go back to what you came here for, which was to tell us how to fix Illinois' government pension problem. Now you get to talk for a little bit more than 30 seconds.
Okay.
What the setting is, what I know, and I haven't studied this, I've talked to people about it, but people read the papers and they hear that it's $90 billion underfunded. This is the pensions for state employees. It also includes a bunch of teachers, public school administrators. That's my perception. Is that it? State employees, people who work for the state, and people who work in the public school system, not all, but number. Those are the pensions that are $90 billion underfunded. Is that right?
You got it right on the money. That's right.
And can it be fixed? And if so, how? I was going to say, what would you do? And what would you do would be the same thing as asking the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago, that is, are you in sync now? What you think should be done is what the Civic Committee thinks should be done?
Yes, in fact, very much so. And all of last year, representing the Civic Committee, we had legislation introduced by Mike Madigan and Tom Cross, unusual, different parties, but they were the co-sponsors. And the purpose was to reform and straighten out the state pension funds. And there are 5 of them, as you said. And very briefly, the only way you can do it is to freeze the benefits that people have currently earned and paid for under the Constitution. That's an entitlement, once you've done it and you've paid for it. And then if they want to continue these benefits going forward at the same high level of return when they would retire, then they're going to have to pay more to do that. Because currently, there are fewer people, just like Social Security, fewer people paying in, more people living longer taking out. And if it isn't reformed in about 10 to 12 years, the pension systems, the teacher system in particular, will be without funds to pay their debts.
Now, people have studied pension systems for the private sector and for the government sector. They've done it with comparisons on the federal level and also on the state level. My understanding is of those studies, they find that generally people in state government, in federal government, are overcompensated when you look at both their salary and their pension relative to the private sector. Have you folks looked at that at all? Yeah,
we have looked at it, and that's very much in the eye's beholder. I don't think it's necessarily true. All the public sector employees, and state and federal, have very generous pensions. But I can tell you that they pay in for those pensions, and the problem is that the matching funds from the state or the federal government are not paid in to keep them solvent. And they're a little more generous than in a private sector, but not outrageously so.
So the basic problem is funding hasn't occurred, and now we have a problem is there are fewer people outside the system contributing, you and I and other taxpayers.
Right.
And there's and they haven't, and since they weren't funded, there's a lot more that has to be contributed in a shorter period of time, and therefore that's the problem. And you're saying, and the other thing is most people realize there are two major differences in pensions. You can have either a defined contribution system, right, in which the employer, in this case the government, puts something in the system, and then you manage it, somebody else manages it, and you get what sort of, what's left in terms of how well it's managed. Or you can have a defined benefit system, which has been pretty much eliminated on the private sector side, but that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
These are defined benefits. These folks leave their jobs with the state, or the public school system, and they're getting a certain percentage of what they were getting when they left the job. The teachers had a kind of a funny system. I mean, I know this because I was on the Winnetka school board, in which everybody did this with a wink. They would just raise the salaries of teachers the last few years because your pension was based on the last few years.
That's right.
Or maybe even just the highest salary, which would be the last few years. And they would do that for superintendents. They did it for everybody. And in large part, Winnetka and the various suburbs weren't paying these pensions. Kind of an odd thing. I think they pay them in the city. The city pays for those, but for the suburban area, somebody else was paying. So you have sort of a perverse incentive set up. And Winnetka would say, well, why do we care? Let's just make them as high as it. Being the really solid citizens, these folks, I was on the Winnetka school board. You imagine how popular I was when these folks would go around soliciting state grants, trying to get money. And I say, for God's sakes, you're in the top 1% of the state. Where do you think the money's coming from? You folks go down and you work on Saturdays for some poor person trying to help them, and then you sit here on the Winnetka school board and try to tax these people? And they said, Jeff, we can do without your advice. Okay, so, but anyway, that's what they were doing.
Right.
And now, finally, and Mike Madigan, who runs the state, the most powerful Democrat in the state, maybe in the country, what does Mike says? He says, I can't remember why we have this law. And if Mike doesn't, I've just done a little Jeff Berkowitz rant, but excuse me, folks. But you know what I'm talking about. It's a slight digression. But Pat Quinn has just noticed this. Others have apparently just noticed. We have a pension system set up in which the local governments, not just schools, but others, they would set the pensions, they would set salaries, essentially, which raise the pensions, and somebody else would pay. And now Pat Quinn, as governor, says, well, one thing we should do is why don't we go back to the suburbs and say, you pay, we shouldn't pay, right? That's partly his answer.
Yeah, and that's an awakening from the whole crew. All last year when we were working trying to get a bill passed, the governor didn't say very much about it, and I'm glad that he is now. That's not meant to be critical of it, you know, what was. But the fact is, I'm not sure this is really well-intentioned anyway. The idea, if we have to solve this, we need legislation to solve it, some sort of legislation where the recipients, the retirees, will have to pay more where they're working and so forth. Right. If you push it down to the local bodies right now, all that will do is to cause property tax increases to cover what they haven't been paying for before, which means that none of those representatives that have to run in those districts will vote for pension reform, so you'll have another year conceivably of nothing happening, and the $90 billion unfunded will be over $100 billion. So the politics is terrible. Yeah,
so you're saying even though it might make sense de novo to do it, because it would have
in
the
principle would
right
make perfect
incentives.
sense. Yeah, perfect sense.
Doing it this way now, the current local folks who have to vote to pass the legislation aren't going to do this because they're going to their constituents or their opponents are going to say, why vote for this guy? He essentially just raised your taxes, right?
That's exactly right. That's the hard, and that their current constituency, quite honestly, throughout the state, Republican and Democrat, is the large amount of contributions they get from the teachers' unions.
So getting back to the basics. So the basics are you can fix this problem. Your committee has studied this. People can find this. If we put up, we may not have put this up on the website or on the show, but the website is illinoisisbroke.com, right?
That's correct.
They can also find other information about this by going to civiccommittee.org.
That's correct.
And they can find your analyses, your studies. Now, when I say your, the way you folks often do it is you go and get other folks to donate time, pro bono, do a lot of research. And by folks, I mean what? Ernst & Winnie? Is Ernst & Winnie still accounting firm?
Ernst & Young.
Ernst & Young.
Pete
Sure,
Marwick,
I'm just stating myself.
McKinsey, the professional service firms are the companies and the firms that make up the Civic Committee of Chicago. And they contribute literally millions of dollars in time. We get for the state, for free, to do studies, what people in the private sector have to pay for.
And so why do they do that for you guys? Why?
Well, because they're members, they're self-interest, they live and work here, their companies are here, they don't want to see Illinois go the terrible way of Michigan or California, although we're fast there.
Truly just they're not they truly are selfless. They're truly making a contribution to society here.
Yeah, they're not affected by these things. I mean, they could most of them have places elsewhere and can go somewhere else.
So you're saying it's simple, just tell the current employees you're going to have to pay more if you want to enjoy the projected benefits you had right now, or you're going to have to cut your benefits, or you're going to have to switch away from a defined benefit system to what we now often refer to as a 401k defined contribution system. You put in money, maybe your employer matches that, but you're going to have less benefits likely in the future. So that's the easy way to do it. And Senate Bill 512, which your organization backed last year, would have done this, would have given choices to people to say, pay more, get less, whatever.
Right. You've summed it up perfectly. The only exception is it wouldn't be simple, but it is there, and it's the answer that you've given. And
it went nowhere last year because?
It went nowhere last year because the politicians that were worried about the remap and now are worried about their primaries this year simply, and by politicians, I mean both parties, people in both parties, didn't want to give a vote on it and couldn't get it called, even though we had the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Republicans in the House as co-sponsors.
The Speaker could call it. What do you mean the Speaker couldn't call it? Speaker Mike Madigan, he can do whatever he wants.
He could call it.
He could blow the studio up tomorrow if he wanted to.
Well, if he wanted to, he's a nice man.
I hope he's not going to do
that.
it.
But the fact is, he co-sponsored it, but you have to be able to put votes on it, and the votes weren't there. Why? Because people did not want to put a tough vote on. Why didn't they want to, if I may? And this is easily provable. The Tribune ran an awful lot on this. If you look at the members of the Illinois General Assembly, House and Senate, upstate and downstate, city of Chicago and elsewhere, they have received so much money from the respective trade unions, AFSCME from the Illinois IEA, Illinois Education Association. So that's why it didn't go anywhere last year. But guess what? Now they've run out of time, and I think there will be a bill this year that will be passed because now we have the governor who ignored it last year, and we have the General Assembly members. Senator Cullerton was a major impediment last year. I'd say it if he were on your show. Now he has a plan of his own. So
But now, last year he said it was unconstitutional.
Right.
Did he change, or did the Constitution change?
No, the Constitution's been there, and
so what
Senator,
changed?
I like Senator.
How can he support
Jeff,
it now?
I like Senator Cullerton very, very much, and I mean that sincerely. That was an excuse for not having the bill called in the Senate. It's an easy way to avoid dealing with problems. And guess what? He's now found a way that would be constitutional, which is not dissimilar, at least in its discussion. The thing he's talking about mostly is what you talked about earlier, sending it down to the local districts and have them pick up the cost.
All right, and you don't think that'll work politically?
Well, it might. I mean, I think
John Cullerton, and we've had John on the show before, not for a while. We hope he'll be back here soon, because we like John as well.
Yeah, I like him very much.
He's the Senate president.
Yeah.
He's a politician. He knows his stuff.
He's a White Sox fan, too, and just a good guy.
That makes him a good guy. Well, okay, we won't talk baseball because we get divergent interest there. But all right, but so we're taping this, I said, February 26th. You don't think it'll pass before the primary, obviously, in March, which is March 20th. The governor, in his State of the Budget speech, said he's formed committees, legislative committees, task force. He wants to study this. He wants this to bubble up to him, the answer. I think that those task forces aren't going to give recommendations till the middle of April. So you don't think it's going to be something, the regular session should end, the legislative session, the end of May. You don't see it passing by then, do you?
The governor believes that it can and should. I don't believe that it will. I'd be overjoyed if it would. It'll probably pass, if at all, this year in the veto session, or even more likely just before the new General Assembly sworn in.
When you have a lot of people voting who aren't coming back, so they can take that bad vote, so to speak.
25 or 30, and they can put it on to pass.
So it's going to pass in a Weasley way, I would say, by people who don't have to face the voters.
Well,
I mean, really, you have to say it's a Weasley way, because you'd like to think your state reps and your state senators, when they vote for something, they're going to be around to take the pain, not people that's how the income tax increase passed in large part. You had a bunch of people supporting that income tax increase who were leaving, and then later got awards in terms of good jobs, right?
Right.
Which is supposed to be illegal. I mean, Rod Blagojevich might be going to do 14 years for what some people did, and they're not doing any time. Am I right on that?
You're stringing a lot of things together. I won't use the word Weasley. I've got to work with these folks. I think it's less than courageous, and they did pass it when their vote didn't count to cause them harm. And I suspect the same thing will happen here.
All right, so we fixed that problem. Let's go over to the Chicago Public Schools.
Yep.
You said choice. That's what it's about, right?
Yep.
School voucher, school choice. Here's an idea. I think, did I take my money with me today? Okay, I may not have. We got this money here. It's $15,000, right? Right here. That's what we spend in the Chicago Public Schools. You take it's a budget of $6 billion. That's with a B, folks. Now, we know there's only about 360,000 students there, right?
360, 380.
But I'll be magnanimous. I'll say they're 400,000 to make the numbers even more favorable to the Chicago public school system. Say there were 400,000. You divide 400,000 into 6 billion. See, I used to be a math major. I don't even need a calculator. You get $15,000 per kid per year. Take it into my famous little backpack here. I don't even squeeze these funds in here. Here. This may be the hardest challenge I have, is opening this backpack. And here, that's it. You don't fool around with the small backpack. Just go right for the big one. Conveniently, it's torn. You just throw the 15,000 in. You know, here's a backpack. 15,000 kids, $15,000. You, as the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago, if you back school voucher, school choice, you could buy yourself backpacks, $360,000, and tell the Chicago public schools to stuff 15,000 in, strap that backpack on the kid. And if the parents are not happy with the public schools, out goes the kid, out goes the cash to the private school of their choice. If they're happy, and many are, maybe even 200,000 of the 400,000 would stay there. Would you sign on to that program today, February 26, 2012? Would you go back and talk, you know, we don't have it with me, we usually did, but Herb Walberg, who was affiliated with the Heartland Institute, did a study showing charter schools, school vouchers. These things all work. They work in Washington, D.C., they work in Cleveland, they work in Milwaukee. All those people will tell you those are all school voucher sites, but also charter schools. So would you go back and do that? Go back to the Civic Committee, your president, talk to your chairman, Jim Farrell, and say, let's get behind school voucher, school choice. You want to take that backpack?
No, I'd say, Jim, we've got our hands full right now. We'll talk about charters, and when we get the charters squared away, we should talk about vouchers. But I myself agree with what you're saying. I think that the vouchers would be a great idea. And they
empower parents, right?
Empower parents, empower children to go to a place that will educate them, and it's supply and demand. People will know who's being educated and who isn't, and they can move to a place where they can. The reason it hasn't happened, the reason politically it doesn't happen, is because the public school systems, not just in Chicago but elsewhere, wherever there are vouchers, there are people leave those systems that are not performing for the kids in droves, and that's what the politics of it dictates. And of course you have the vested interest of the teachers union. In Chicago, it's the Chicago Teachers Union.
But the teachers who are good teachers would benefit. So not clear. I'm sure not all teachers are against school vouchers, school choice, or charter schools, because in this system you would have a flexibility of pricing for salaries for teachers.
Sure.
Right now, if you get paid more each year when you're of experience you have. So if you came in and you were 3 years out, the best teacher in the school, you're going to get much less than somebody who may not be teaching as well, but maybe they're 15 years.
Right.
You would change that for charter schools, and charter schools can change that.
We do, and we can and we do.
And school vouchers would have schools of that type. They'd be privately run.
Sure.
Those best teachers would get more than they're currently getting.
Right.
They're not being helped by their teachers union, are they?
They're not, because the people in the teachers union as well want to teach, most of them, I believe, right. Although it's not always obvious in Chicago, where you're arguing over how much of time you spend with your students day to day. That's another story. I think the mayor is taking that head on and doing a good job.
But you're saying that
in charters you don't have those problems. You can lengthen your day. You can use your curriculum. You can pay your teachers more. Charter schools hire union teachers, but in the charter schools they do not and cannot abide by union rules. In other words, they can't say it's 3 o'clock, I'm going home.
But aren't they? The union is trying to look into whether they can unionize the teachers at Chicago public schools. Now, can they do that? And once they unionize, at charter schools, that is, I think the teachers unions are trying to organize as a part of their union. I think the teachers who are currently not a part of the union at the charter schools. Have you looked into that? Are they doing that, and can they do that legally?
Well, anything they can certainly try. They have that right. There are a number of schools right now that have union teachers in them, but they don't abide by the shortened day, et cetera, et cetera. They ignore or don't abide by the rules. And so it's not the fact of a union member in a charter school, it's the fact of the charter school having the freedom to teach a curriculum in the day and get performance.
But how does that change if they are union teachers? Can't they organize?
Well, sure, that's what they want to do. They want to take it over just like they do in the public
Chicago
schools.
Teachers Union wants to do. They haven't been able to do that yet.
No, they haven't.
They're negotiating a contract. Would that be part of what they might be negotiating?
No, they're negotiating with the mayor and Chicago Public
That's
Schools.
just not, so it doesn't affect the charter schools.
Doesn't affect the charters.
Okay. Although it does in this sense that the law education reform passed last year, and the law, as I understand it, says that the Chicago Public Schools can have a longer day. That's not up to debate. But they have to persuade the faculty, the teachers, that they should continue to work either at the current salary or another salary. If they're not willing to pay for that longer day, then these teachers and the Chicago Teachers Union can go out on strike. And then you don't have a longer day, you don't have teachers in the Teachers Union teaching, and then what do? You turn to people who are outside the union and hire them to work?
Well, the mayor
could you do that? Could you
do
break
that.
the
You
union
could
that
do
way?
that. You could, no one wants to break the union. People want union. I come from a union family. My dad was president of a UAW local when I grew up. My mother was a Michigan.
You're an auto guy.
I'm an auto guy, and
We
I'm from
didn't get there,
Detroit.
yeah.
I'm from Detroit.
You're a Mitt Romney.
I'm a Mitt Romney supporter, and I worked for his old timer when he was governor. It was my first political thing. The point is, this is not anti-union in a sense of trying to break anything. It's getting people that belong to a union or not to perform for the pay they're receiving. Most importantly, to educating the kids. It's not about those teachers. It's not about the unions. It's about the children.
The kids.
The kids, and they're getting.
Do you support the 90? Does Rom want the 90-day longer school day of 90 additional minutes, or is it 120, something like that? 90 to
Something
120
like
minutes.
that. I support.
You support that longer school day?
Very much so.
And a longer school year?
Very much so.
Now, I think the teachers union said that's fine. I think they threw out as their, we've heard, it's not completely public, they've suggested you want a 30% longer school day, pay us 30% more.
Right.
Would you do that? If you were president of the Chicago Board of Education, who is the president right now?
David Vitale.
Would you tell David to fork over 30%
No,
more?
I admire David. I wouldn't tell him anything. But if I were the president, I'd say, no, you have to do what everyone else does. You have to give more because you're not giving very good service right now.
And you're only going to pay him 4% more a year?
And you're not earning
Maybe
the
not
money.
even that.
You're not earning the money you're being paid right now. Look at the performance of these kids.
So what would you give him per year?
I don't know.
But not 30%.
Remember earlier, I wouldn't give them 30%. No.
Maybe 4% if they're lucky. 4% a year more.
No, what the city can afford because
Which is what? Nothing.
Because they can pick up and well, that's the hard place we're at because they can pick up and teach anywhere they'll give them a job, I suppose.
But your organization has studied this. You believe in charter schools.
Yeah.
You believe charter schools outperform traditional public schools, holding everything else constant, as the economists say, ceteris paribus. Right? You understand? Holding everything else constant? Yeah, right. Okay. Holding everything else constant, if you have the same composition, the same parents, the same pool you're drawing from, if you have a charter school in that neighborhood and you have a traditional public school, on average, the evidence shows that the charter schools outperform those traditional public schools. Am I right on that?
Most of the time.
On average?
On average, absolutely. On average, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Real quick, we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Ty Fahner. Tice, thank you so much for coming.
Jeff, I enjoyed it.
You're going to come
fast.
back? You're going to come
If
back?
you invite me back, I'll come back. And
Love to have you back. Ty's right around the corner here. We tape in Skokie, you're in Evanston, right?
Right.
You got that fleet of cars?
I do.
You got that car dealership out in Lake County, right?
Fox Lake.
All right. What's the name? Well, I don't know if we can say
We
that.
don't want to do that.
We can't do that. But you know cars.
I know cars. I love cars.
Mitt Romney knows cars.
Yeah.
You're backing him, but people say he is not authentic. You're telling me Mitt Romney is authentic?
He is authentic. He's decent. He's honest. He's a good father. He's a good husband. He's good. He pays a lot of taxes that all the people have been receiving in benefits just as I do. And if people don't think he's authentic, he's got a lot of authenticity in the Congress and in the White House that they made. And I don't think they're doing a very good job. Just look at our country these days.
People say they want Mitch Daniels there. He would be better. He can connect better. Jeb Bush would be better. Chris Christie. They say they want an open convention. They hope that Mitt doesn't go there with the majority. Newt doesn't have a majority. Santorum doesn't. That's an open convention. Nobody's got the majority. Then we broker it, and then we negotiate. And we find somebody who's better. Are you telling me Mitch Daniels wouldn't be a better candidate?
I'm telling you, Mitch Daniels would not be a better candidate than Mitch Romney.
Mitch, the best guy the Republicans have to go against.
Well,
Barack
you
Obama.
think so, and I like him. He was my secretary.
That was a question.
No. Mitt Romney.